To you, and thank you for talking to us. I mean, is this more noise and bluster from the police leadership, or do we have some convincing ideas on the table?
Good evening. I don't think one could ever say this is noise and bluster where Bheki Cele is around. So I think, one can believe him when he says that they are going to tackle this head on. And certainly we've been waiting for this announcement for quite some time, and we are happy that finally we have some clarity about what the police intends to do about these crimes. So the announcement of a high-density stabilisation operation is not just welcome, but it's reminiscent of the Operation Crackdown approach that we had in April 2000, when Bheki Cele was National Commissioner. Similar approach, stabilizing the situation, on the one hand deploying maximum force, high density police presence in so-called hotspot areas, and then a focus in terms of the organized crime threat analysis approach, focusing on organized criminal groups. So all of that, I think, is to be welcomed. It worked in 2000. It can work again. Of course, there are weaknesses in terms of crime intelligence, which we didn't have to the extent that we now have in 2000. But hopefully, the indications are that this is now also receiving attention.
Well, the plan is, of course, to boost the deployment of lieutenant generals in the field, to move resources to an operational level. We've been told about dedicated teams to track down and arrest criminals. Quite a number of specifics, and as you point out, of course, that looking at the hotspots, Gauteng, KZN and the Western Cape, those are the provinces said to be most affected by the recent waves of crime.
Yes, I think, this is a multifaceted, integrated approach to the crime situation. The main focus, of course, geographically speaking, is KwaZulu-Natal, Gauteng and the Western Cape. We are looking at gang violence, political killings in KZN. We're looking at armed robberies, especially in Gauteng, but also the other provinces. And then you have gang violence in the Western Cape. So 4 major crime threats that this strategy is aimed at. And the deployment of lieutenant generals, I think, is a good idea in the sense that this should enhance the leadership difficulties that the police may experience in some of these problem areas. So I think the idea is sound. Whether they still have the kind of leadership available, given the number of senior officers under investigation, is something that we still need to see. But I think, in principle, the approach is sound, and we certainly support this.
We'll talk about that in just a moment, Dr. Burger, but let's also deal with the issue of officers that are now going to be deployed more on the ground. These are officers who are normally tasked with administrative duties. Now we're going to be seeing them in the field to create this idea of police visibility. It's one thing to have police visibility, and of course, whilst more visibility is always going to be welcome, the real issue is around effective investigative capacities, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think you are spot on. I'm also a little concerned. I think, of course, again, in principle, we support the idea that if you need to increase police visibility, and you need to provide the kind of high-density policing that the Minister and the National Commissioner has referred to, you will have to boost the numbers of police in the field. And the only place you will find those additional police officers are those currently employed in administrative positions. The question, however, is how long is it since they have been operationally active? And how difficult will it be for them, who's been out of the operational arena for a long time, to adapt to those positions? Also, where will they be deployed? How long will they be deployed? This may create huge problems for them in terms of being away from their families for a long time. So this is a process that will have to be very, very carefully managed by the police leadership, so as to get the best out of this approach, but also accepting that not all police officers in administrative positions will necessarily be good deployments in terms of operational duties.
That's exactly why, Dr. Burger, we started this interview with whether or not this is an idea or a plan with convincing ideas, or perhaps just more noise and more bluster. But there also has been this perception that the police are out of their depth. The years of infighting and the hollowing out of crime intelligence have borne bad fruit. And that is, of course, the issue of leadership, the issue of capacity within law enforcement to deal with the crisis we're currently facing.
Yeah, this is something we've often referred to, is the huge challenges that the police face. On the positive side, we have a new minister who has proven himself in the past as dedicated to promoting a more hands-on approach to policing. And we also now have a situation where you have a commissioner of police who's come through the ranks, who's also, in a sense, come to the party with clean hands. And most importantly, we now have a new head of crime intelligence, who on the one hand is given the responsibility of turning that division around from the demise that it's experienced under its previous head. And you also have a new head of the Hawks. All of these are very, very good appointments. It has a lot of promise. They are confronted, of course, with the challenges of fixing the problems experienced in those divisions, crime intelligence in the Hawks very specifically. But at the same time, they are confronted with the huge challenges that they face in terms of the crime fighting responsibilities. But the good news is that we have a new leadership team, and the promise is that they would be able, over the next few months, to also strengthen the leadership around them. And all of that would, and we expect that would make a very, very positive impact on the ability of the police to take the fight to these criminals.
Dr. Burger, of course, we've seen the syndicates acting a lot more boldly in recent months. We've seen displays really of military precision in terms of how they execute, for example, the cash in transit heists. People will say, critics will say, well, we don't need more platitudes. We know that the police themselves have been infiltrated. We heard in Parliament, for example, that officers in crime intelligence who themselves have criminal records for serious offences. So surely at the very least, that means the syndicates know what the plans are.
Yeah, I think this is the challenge, that the police currently have, that they have to fight this current crime wave that we are experiencing, knowing that they have certain problems within the organization, a huge rot, in fact, in terms of the involvement of police officers at almost every level of the organization. We know, for example, the investigations against top leaders in the police, generals amongst them, and every level right down to constable. So what the police have to do, I mean, they are in a crisis. This country is in a crisis in relation to the crime levels that we are experiencing. But we don't have an alternative. This is the only police we have. So we have to trust the leaders, the new leadership, that they will find ways to clean up the organization. And one would love to see a return of the police's specialist units in terms of organized crime and serious and violent crimes, but also a great need for a return of the anti-corruption unit, because they have to clean out the organization from within, not wait until criminal and corrupt officers are exposed by others, such as IPID, who is performing a commendable job in this regard. But the police need their own internal capacity to also search for these criminals in their own, amongst them, in their own organization, and root them out. So with a new leadership, we need to start a process, an internal process of cleaning out the police service. And we just have to look at the recommendations of the National Development Plan, where extremely good recommendations are made, and it was already adopted in 2012 already by government. But we haven't seen the implementation of any of those recommendations. So that would be a good starting point.
Right, fewer plans perhaps and more action. Dr. Johan Burger there from the Institute for Security Studies talking to us from our Pretoria studio. We've got more for you on Full View a little bit after this break.